This presentation about student exchange, it is about acculturative stress and acculturation process. My name is Elena de Lorenzo from the School of Nursing in Vitoria-Gasteiz, Spain. The aim it is to explain the process of acculturation and the acculturative stress during a student exchange. The following question could be, what is acculturative stress? As you may remember from Unit 1, acculturative stress is generated by the effort that is required to adapt psychologically to the new culture. It is a kind of stress that is related to the confusion in roles, values, communication styles that create anxiety and even tiredness due to the continuous observation and investigation in the face of cultural differences that conduces sometimes to even question one's identity. This stress could also be related to a sense of loss or deprivation of, friendship, profession, and possessions, even landscape or climate or even status. This stress could increase due to the rejection of the members of the whole society and could end up with feelings of helplessness for not being able to cope with the new environment. As trainers, it is very important that we understand the stress reactions generated when entering another culture. The phases or the process of acculturation generated and the factors that modulate these processes. So with this knowledge, of course, we can help the students to regulate the stress. Traditionally, researchers about the acculturation process or phases of culture shock, as Ober and Adler, describe one model, a U model, with a U, which means that they had a honeymoon, high mood at the beginning, a crisis, and then the other the other part of the U, it is the adaptation process. However, recent researchers, as Colin Ward points out, that these stages can vary, have different connotations and intensity depending on the people and the context where they live. In fact, Deems and Gerhardt in 2015 conducted a study with a sample of 2,480 general students participated in a cultural exchange program, following up from 2 months before to 6 months after the exchange. As you can see in the figure in the left, the study identified 5 patterns. One with a high moment of stress that decreases as the exchange progresses, another one with a slight stress at the beginning that increases in the middle of the exchange periods and decreases again as the exchange progresses, and 3 which describe a small increase in stress that is maintained throughout the exchange, and so on until 5. On the right, we have a study that we performed with a group of nursing students that had to take responsibility to provide care to the whole society. And we identified 3 stages with a very important moment of stress and even cultural crisis in the earliest stage of the exchange with around the 5 first weeks of the exchange. So, as this could vary, it is very important that to know the different schemes and stages of the acculturation process and be very cautious in inquiring about where these students are located in order to help them. What are some of the cultural stressors of the nursing students in an international placement? Well, in this presentation, we are going to focus in the stresses of nursing students that had experienced a long-term exchange where they had to provide care to the host society and, of course, to the host population. We classify three types of stressors: the difficulty with the language, the lack of cultural codes, and other stressors. In relation with language, despite prior preparation, they find that the language level does not meet the demands of speed and complexity of communicative interactions. But this was more or less expected. But more important, they did not know the codes of nonverbal communication. You know, the management of silences, the meaning of gestures, the use of touch, and the lack of understanding of cultural meanings associated with certain words. This limited their ability to interpret the state of people's mood and create a climate of trust and therapeutic communication that is so important for us nurses. So it is a source of frustration. But among all the stressors, the lack of knowledge of the social cultural codes and the codes of the health system is one of the most important, because students need these codes for integration, and this generated feelings of confusion, insecurity, incompetence, helplessness, thus increasing the feelings of uselessness and frustration. Among the lack of cultural codes, the difference in professional and social values is the most important, such as the difference, for instance, in perspective of care, the autonomy and independence of patients, or clinical safety, as an example. This leads them to live important cultural conflicts with themselves, with the patients, and with the professionals of the unit. This situation could even lead to a crisis of values and internal chaos, since they are deprived of the structure and security that values provides, increasing the perception of incompetence and frustration and even blockage. But I would like to highlight from the other stressors one that is the stressor of feeling different, the foreigner, the other. This feeling of not belonging to the group has an impact on them. But it is very important and very interesting to work with this stressor in order to develop cultural desire. During this critical stage of the acculturation process, when they really suffer of acculturative stress, students generate an emotional affective response of confusion, frustration, feeling judged, powerless, and feeling of being incompetent. These feelings slow down the cognitive process and slow down their ability to act, because they have to question and review everything to see if it is okay in the whole society, and this is really exhausting. But it is very interesting because they are not aware that this is natural in the acculturation process and believe that it's their fault. I was good before and I am not good anymore. This induces them to lower down their self-esteem, make a negative assessment of their own capacity, that it sums and leads them to feel ashamed and sometimes even to isolate themselves. Here is very important to be proactive as trainers and act, because if we don't intervene, the learning of cultural competence can be a failure, much more in students that have more factors that are modulating negatively their acculturative stress. What are some of the factors that modulate the acculturative stress? Well, we have try to classify them in three areas. Clarify that some factors operate as protectors and some of them as precursors of acculturative stress. And we understand that the effect of these factors is additive. So that if there are too many protective factors or vice versa, the development of intercultural competence could be jeopardized. These factors, we have classified them into personal factors. So we have personality traits. If you have really extroverted students, probably the stress will go down. But if they are really introverted, probably the stress will go up. The level, or even traits as maturity and so on. The level of linguistic competence, if it is high, it will be less stress, of course. And another one will be the previous intercultural experience. As much intercultural experience you have, it is possible that the stress will go down, will be lower. In relation to the formative area, if we involve the students in direct attention to healthcare, probably they could have more stress, more even if it is a really stressful unit. It would be less if you have previous intercultural training, and less as well if you have training sessions during the exchange that, of course, if we will be tutoring or coaching the students. It is very interesting as well as a factor to have a support group, because the support group it helps to decrease stress, or at least to have lower stress. In relation to the social area, as if the cultural distance gets greater, the stress it is greater as well. And another aspect, it is the acculturation strategies of society, of the whole society. So if the whole society rejects foreigners, probably the stress will be higher. We have to take into account all these factors, and it will be wonderful that we could have like a coordination. So we would use this, assess and review these factors in order to plan the exchange. Well, thank you so much for your interest. And of course, if you need any more explanation, if you have any question or any doubt, please contact me. This is my email, Elena de Lorenzo @ehu.us.